that this case could have if it's decided in the way that we seem to be reading these tea leaves?
Right, yeah, so the ramifications will be nationwide and could, affect care for decades to come because 26 states, including Tennessee, have passed similar restrictions to this. And I've been talking to families over the past 3 years as these restrictions have taken effect about how they've had to leave their home states to try to continue access to care for their children. Some have even, had to drive up to 5 hours. For example, I talked to a parent the other day in Missouri who drove 5 hours from St. Louis to Chicago to continue care for his child. So this will have implications for families across the country.
I know I was reading some of the reporting that you were doing about how they would have to drive just over state lines in order to even just do a telehealth appointment to continue getting the kinds of medication that they need. I know that we're talking about this in the sense of how it would apply to people who are trying to transition, but the other piece of this that I can't help but wonder is, could this have impact in spaces like youth sports, where we've seen Republicans consistently try to make this an issue? Are these tied in any way?
Yeah, that came up during court today, and it's really unclear. The ACLU argued that they wouldn't be tied together because the state would be relying on a completely different set of justifications for that kind of law. And it is important to note that when the ACLU has sued against the sports restrictions, they've relied on arguments related to Title IX, whereas today they were relying on arguments related to the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So it's really different.
When you look at cases like these and the way that Republicans have focused on this issue specifically, are there other things coming down the pipeline that you know of, because you cover this all the time, that maybe the general public is just not paying attention to? If not this case, what comes next?
Right. Well, what a lot of folks don't know, I think, is that this case could have effects on adult care as well, because the same argument has been used, for example, to argue against restrictions on Medicaid funding or private insurers not covering trans health care for adults in North Carolina and West Virginia. So if the Supreme Court says, no, this isn't discrimination based on sex to exclude this care for transgender people, then it could undermine that argument, which is trans people have told me they're really afraid of, particularly because the Trump administration has promised to bar Medicaid funding completely, and that would affect adults as well.
You were nodding about this.
Yeah, that's what some of the liberal justices admonished the court to consider. It's not just about the state bans. It could be soon about a national ban. So we could have far-reaching implications.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much for covering all of this for us, Joe and Ken.